At Newsfirst got first-hand exclusive interview with Rick Dell, who is no stranger to this equipment which you see here. Well, Rick Dell, I believe it's your first time here in the country. What do you think about it so far?
Yeah, it is my first time in Sri Lanka. It's very nice. Everybody's been very friendly. It's been a good cultural experience, learning Sri Lankan culture, some Sri Lankan food, and but most of all, getting a chance to see Sri Lankans play baseball. You know, it's always interesting going to a new country, a new environment, a new culture, and watching their interpretation or how they're playing the game. So I was out at the field the last 3 days, and it was very interesting. It was fun.
It was very fun, you said. When you look into the international arena and when you look down here in this little island, what do you think? What level of achievement has Sri Lanka achieved in terms of baseball?
Well, you know, I've talked to some of the federation people and the local people, and they're talking about some of the rankings that they've had internationally, and then some of the success they've had in the West Asian tournament, some of the other more local Southeast Asian tournaments. Although they haven't won any gold medals, they certainly have medaled and they've competed. So I find that very interesting, due to the lack probably of support that they may have as opposed to other venues.
I see. Something very closely which goes with baseball, I believe, is LA, which is no strange game to us Sri Lankans. When you compare the two sports, LA and baseball, what do you have to say about it?
Well, I haven't had a chance to see LA very much, except I saw some photos and some videos. But it is a bat and a ball. It's the same thing as cricket. It's a bat and a ball mentality. And so one advantage that a place like Sri Lanka has, maybe over some Central European countries where soccer is probably king, is that they grow up in a environment where swinging a bat and catching a ball and throwing a ball that's not a foreign concept. So I think that the relationship basically is that bat and ball mentality.
Okay. Also, I would like to ask you, well, when you look into the level of baseball which Sri Lanka has achieved, do you think you're from an international country and you're involved in a lot of baseball-related activities internationally and a global figure? Well, if you are to give out some advice and support to our aspiring baseball players in Sri Lanka, what would that message be?
I would say for the existing players, is to work on your throwing. You know, work on throwing and catching, because those are the two skills. Throwing and catching are going to get you to a higher level. Throwing ends up relating to pitching, and then of course later you can learn to hit. You can learn to do some other things. But the number one advice I would give, if I was giving anybody in Sri Lanka, is to get a baseball and a glove and a bat into the hands of young people, and start to get boys and girls at the age of 6 or 7 and 8, 9, 10 years old playing baseball. One thing about baseball that is different than other sports is that the throwing action, the arm strength, is developed between the age of 6 and 14 years old. So jumping into this game at 13 or 14 is great, and you'll become a pretty proficient player, and you'll enjoy it, just like a lot of the college players that I saw are enjoying it. But to really have aspirations of playing on a higher professional level, you need to start throwing this when you're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And that will give you a better foundation for a high-level future.
Okay. And also I would like to ask you, well, say you're extended an invitation by our authorities to come and help uplift baseball here in Sri Lanka.
Mm-hmm.
Would you accept that?
Yeah, we have some. I have some programs that I work out of China, that we work within the Southeast Asia region. I've been doing that for years, by the way. So it's the fact that it hasn't happened in Sri Lanka is just because we haven't had a relationship built yet. But those are very real possibilities of us getting some support to Sri Lanka baseball from our development centers that we've built in China.
You said so that there was not much of a relationship, but you're here today in our island. Do you mean to say that relationships have strengthened and there is a platform created for international figures like you to come and intervene into our sport?
Well, I think first of all, at least we know who you are. So when I talk about relationships, we're on our first date. I mean, we know who you are now, and that's a big step forward. So before we get ahead of ourselves, I think the important thing is me coming here, getting to meet all of the people in the association, the people in the sports ministry, the people in the U.S. Embassy who have been instrumental in negotiating for me to come here, contacting, have been persistent in that happening. And then I think from here we just take it one step at a time. But as I said, one thing that we could offer certainly is some support, maybe with some coaches coming for a limited period of time, or possibly even inviting a couple of young prospective players to train for a little bit at our development centers.
And also, sir, when you look at other sports here in this island, we'll take, for example, cricket, soccer, tennis, beat of that sort. But when you look at baseball, Sri Lanka hasn't actually reached the top. Why do you think such a situation has arisen in the country?
Well, it's just like in a lot of places. I mean, culturally, I would only imagine, just from the brief time that I've been here in observations, that cricket is probably something you have a passion for, along with rugby. So when I look at those athletes, I'm looking at a top quality athlete. I'm looking at some pretty good bodies. But that comes over time. That didn't happen in 15 minutes. It happened over a long, long period of time. And people learned how to play the game. You've got better coaching. And you've got a passion and understanding for the sport. So that's why those sports are on top. And, you need to create a base and a foundation if you want a sport like baseball to catch on.
Well, say Sri Lanka is in the process of getting the baseball game up there internationally. Where do you think we should start?
Start with your youth. It's got to start young. And that's the secret to any sport. You want to be good in soccer, you want to be good in, I'm sure, rugby, or you want to be good in cricket. It starts when you're young. It's tough to pick up things in midstream. You can pick them up and enjoy them on a recreation level. But if it was that easy, everybody'd be doing it. You need to get some exposure to the game at a very young age.
What about resources when it comes to financial?
Well, finances are always important. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Talent Code. Look it up and read it. And you're going to find out that all the great players that come in sports in the world, they don't come from places with money. They come from places in Brazil or inner cities in the United States that where they don't have a whole lot of support. Some of the best soccer players come out of countries that, and they come out of backgrounds that aren't very affluent. But the key is that you have to have some ignition. You have to have something to launch your interest, and then talented enough coaches that can keep the momentum of that sport.
Very well said. Finally, there's something that you would like to tell your audience today, listening to you, watching you at this moment. What would that simple message be?
I would say that, go with your passions, and baseball's a great sport. It's becoming an international sport. In the Major League Baseball, where I work for, it's mostly based in America, but the reality is that 42% of all the players who played in the major leagues this year were born outside of the United States. So it's become a very popular international sport. And being in an Asian country, if you look at the world rankings right now, Japan is number 1, the United States is number 2, Korea is number 3, and Chinese Taipei is number 4. So one thing I would say, that if you're probably one of the best soccer players in Sri Lanka, you may not be one of the top soccer players in the world. If you're one of the best basketball players in Sri Lanka, you may not be one of the best basketball players in the world. But if you're one of the best baseball players in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka is one of the best teams in Asia, then you're probably world class.
Well, that's the message that he had to give out to you today. Thank you very much, and all the very best in everything you do.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.